Hi there and welcome back to Amplify, the Digital Marketing Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Bob Tentle and every week I'm joined by creators, consultants and practitioners who share what makes their business work. Whether you run your own business or you're just thinking of stepping out on your own for the first time, you're in the right place. If you're new to the show, then welcome along. Just take a second to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes, and you can dig into some older ones when you finish this one. If it's your first time joining us for the show, then you'll probably want to join our Facebook group. Just visit the shortcut URL amplifyme.fm/insiders and you'll be taken right there. At the very heart of digital marketing is content, and for a lot of people this presents a challenge. We might be very good at our technical or creative niche, but without consistently creating our own content, it's hard for us to build the kind of audience we need to stand out and really build a business we love, full of options and choices. This week, my guest is Helen Pollock, who runs the Content Doc. Helen's business is all about helping people like you and me get our content mojo back on. So welcome along and let's meet Helen. So Helen Pollock, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to start by maybe just telling us a little bit about who you are, where you are and the kind of work you do?
Yes, of course, and thank you for having me. So I'm Helen Pollock. My business is the Content Doc, and I am a ghostwriter, a non-fiction book coach, and I help entrepreneurs with any written content really. Either I write it for them or I coach them to write better business content themselves.
And content is such a broad topic. Is there an area you tend to find yourself snapping back to?
It's all about writing for me. So that's what I concentrate on. The trouble is, I'm sure as you're well aware, when you're working with entrepreneurs and very small businesses, you have to take quite a holistic approach. So I will often I'll find myself advising about all sorts of things, often video. People are quite nervous about that sort of thing. And an overall content marketing strategy, but my passion is for writing, and also for making sure that people are able to repurpose content they create, and it all links together well. So
I think when I had a look through your LinkedIn profile, there's an awful lot of PR there, going back a long time.
There is.
Is PR something you're still involved in?
Yeah, I am. The reason I went into PR, and I've worked in every area of the marketing mix over the years. I was like head of customer research at Aston Martin for a bit, so which is really different to PR. But yeah, I went into PR because I love writing, and when I graduated from university, I was looking to find a job where I could write for a living. And I went for an interview at the local newspaper because I quite fancied journalism. But actually, you had to run a car, your own car, on a salary of like £6,000, and I just it would have been so tight. I just thought, no, I'm not up for that. So when I came across PR, because I did a sort of post-grad marketing and management course and found out about PR, and I thought, oh, hello, this sounds like fun. It's a way I can make a living from doing an awful lot of writing, and I'll be able to survive on a PR salary. So yeah.
And what was it that sort of sent you off on your own direction, running your own business, a Content Doc? Because that's a couple of years old now. Was there something triggered you to decide, okay, I'm going to do my thing now?
I mean, as far back as the early noughties, I went travelling around the world by myself for a year, from 2003 to 2004, and sort of from that point onwards, I was talking to friends about having what I termed a portfolio lifestyle, where I did a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of the other, because I've always been someone who's quite an all-rounder, and I like variety, and I just wasn't finding that in corporate roles, but actually I did end up going back into corporate life, just through necessity, really. So then the big change, the big impetus for change came about when I had my daughter. She's now 8. And when I was on maternity leave, I knew I had no desire whatsoever to go back to my corporate job, and I would have had to have gone back to that full time, and I didn't want to. I wanted to work flexibly around my family, and be in control of my own destiny. So I set up Little Dragons, which was a Mandarin Chinese language school teaching Mandarin to children.
And is Mandarin something that comes naturally to you?
No, uh, it's not. I should say my degree was French and Italian. I also speak some German, some Spanish, some Portuguese, various little bits and bobs of other languages too, and some basic Mandarin. But I never taught. I can teach like one half term or one term, say, to a primary school after school club, and that's about it. But I employed, people who were fluent in Mandarin, to teach
Mm.
rather than myself. And the reason I set up Little Dragons was I was looking for, a business idea. I was teaching some primary school after school French, and I kept hearing on the radio, oh, blimey, where this country is losing out economically because we don't have enough Mandarin speakers. There's a massive gap in the number of people who speak Mandarin, the number of people we need to speak Mandarin, and no one seemed to really be offering primary school Mandarin, and it's at primary school where we need to start learning languages, for neurological reasons. And no one seemed to be doing that in a sort of fun and lively way. So I thought, I'm going to do that. So I worked with a Mandarin teacher to create a course program, and off we went.
And obviously you're not doing that now, are you?
No. It was about 5 years that Little Dragons was going for, and it just wasn't profitable enough. I tweaked that business model every which way. So initially, it was aimed at primary schools. It turned out that parents didn't want to pay more than a couple of quid, really. And also, it was really hard to get Mandarin teachers who are great teachers.
I guess they're all in demand as well.
They're in demand, they can charge more. And then, there isn't, the appetite from the parents to pay more than they would pay for, say, French or Spanish, where teachers are 10 a penny.
Yeah.
So then I created an online course with a brilliant teacher, but I wasn't getting the numbers still. So I think, maybe it was just a bit before its time, or I'm not sure. But then there were a few things that happened in 2017 which just made me think, oh, blimey, I'm so tired of this, and I feel like I've gone as far as I can. And so I thought, well, I've always been doing some PR stuff on the side, of Little Dragons. So, whether that was working part-time for a PR agency at the same time, or just working, as a freelancer. So I thought, yeah, the time has come. There's so many things happen. It was kind of like, I don't know, you feel like this is a sign.
Yeah, I think sometimes stopping a business is the hardest thing. It's quite easy to start a business, and most people never stop unless they simply fail. So making the decision to not do this anymore is quite a hard thing.
It is, because it feels like a failure, and that's really hard. But I do not, redu- sorry, I don't regret a single moment of those 5 years, because I learnt so much about business, that I've been able to take forward. And kind of where I am today is a direct result of many of those experiences with Little Dragons. And the other thing is, I know that my company taught thousands of children Mandarin Chinese during that time.
Mm.
And some of those children will go on to, will carry on studying Mandarin, and it may, change their lives in some way or other, or shape their lives for the better. So I feel really proud of what we achieved, even
Yeah.
though technically, that business could be said to be a failure.
I think legacy comes in all different shapes and sizes, and it's not always commercial. And I think that's really what you described there.
Yeah.
So, there is a legacy, um, but it's not one that's necessarily led to you becoming wealthy.
Yes.
Um, so fast forward to the content doc.
Mm.
Who is your ideal customer now?
So my customers tend to be solopreneurs and particularly podcasters. I seem to be working with loads of podcasters in recent times. Um, and they are people who need to create lively and relevant written content for their business. So I'm a ghostwriter. So I write business and non-fiction books for my clients. Or there are people who want to write a book but want to do it themselves, but they need some support. So I act as a book coach for those people. And I've got the 3-month program and a 6-month program, depending on where they are and what they need. And then I still, do some writing of articles, blog posts, etc. myself, if that's what clients need. And I also coach people to write their own written content, because I think that is there are people who want to write their own stuff who aren't happy to give up their own voice, I guess, and just need some support and accountability and help to, particularly, I find structure is often the biggest problem that my clients have. It's coming up with a structure to create that lively, relevant content consistently.
I think, the content creation process is very difficult for a lot of people. It's having a process for sort of categorizing what your topics should be,
Yeah.
and then consistently generating and capturing ideas. That's the hardest part. But once you've done that, the execution on those ideas can also be equally difficult for some people. So what sort of processes do you bring to that kind of work?
So the first thing is that, and it's the same for books as it is with an article or even a blog post, or even a social media post. Really, you need to do your research before you put pen to paper, or perhaps finger to laptop more these days. So you need to be absolutely crystal clear who your audience is. Who are these people? What are their problems? How do you solve them? And even what sort of trigger words are going to appeal to them. And I always go through I've got a mini course, a free mini course called the Content Structure Buster. And
I love free courses.
indeed, and I can give you a link to that. I'd be delighted for your listeners to have access to that.
I will definitely share that, because I think this is such a common problem.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm interrupting.
don't worry.
I got excited by the word free.
I totally hear you. I'm from Yorkshire and have mostly Scottish blood, so that word excites me too.
So you were at trigger words. So
So I was at
yeah.
trigger words. So yeah, you've got to use trigger words that will resonate with your audience. You've got to put their outcomes at the front of your mind as you're writing. I have a worksheet called the Article Framer, which actually uses it's a thing from the Reuters Style Guide where you ask yourself, who, why, what, when, where, how, and I think I've added so what. Um, and you just, answer all those questions before you start writing, and then you're in a much better position to know what your actual thread is. Because I think that's whenever you're writing a story, you're always looking for your angle. What's my angle going to be? And going through that process just helps you to frame your article or your piece of written content and know what your thread is, and that's half the battle.
Mm.
And then the other thing is getting your brand values across. You need to just be clear on how you want to sound and how you don't want to sound. So I've got, but also part of that mini course is a simple brand values worksheet, because we don't actually have to spend a million years on sorting that out. It can be quite a simple process. So those things are kind of, I like to think of those as lenses that we need to be looking through to actually find the right focus for our written content.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, or kind of filters, or something of that ilk. Um, and once we've done that, then we can be much clearer when we actually start to write. We can hopefully just bang it out, and then also there's just so many simple things that we can do that make it much easier. So a good example is that my other half has started doing a university course through work recently, and he hadn't studied for like 20 years, so he was he was really worried about this, and so he asked for my help to structure his first assignment. And he was kind of feeling overwhelmed. So this could be an absolute parallel with someone who has negotiated a feature in a magazine, and then it's like, okay, so now I've got to sit down and write 1,000 words about this topic,
Mm.
and it seems like a lot of words. And the way to break it down is to, like anything, you have to write an introduction. So that's the tell them what you're going to tell them. Then the main body of the content, that's you tell them. And then your conclusion, tell them what you told them. And it's not rocket science, but I think it can all go out of the window when we're faced with particularly a longer piece of content to write.
I think that's you're quite right. I mean, research sounds very, very simple, but how many people actually sit down and do the research when they've decided they're going to write a blog post? It's rare. They will dive straight into writing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I mean, introduction, copy, conclusion, it sounds very simple. It sounds very much like common sense, but actually when you sit down to execute, have you actually got that in the back of your mind, or have you completely forgotten these simple principles? And I think a lot of the time people do forget them.
I think so too. And then, so if you've got, say, your introduction, your conclusion, and I don't know, choose a number of paragraphs in the middle, and then you can if you break down your word count and think, well, I need to be hitting approximately 250 words in that paragraph, and for each one, I think that's, breaking things down in a simple way is such a help. And I know it it really helped my other half with this tricky assignment. And not only that, but a lot of his cohort, some of his peers on the course, were also struggling, and he mentioned, that particular tip to them, and that also, they thanked him and said that had really helped. So,
Mm.
well, those, some of these things, as you say, seem simple. Actually, people don't really do them, and you know, and that's as a professional writer. If I was sitting down to write something, I'd always do my research first, and then you can, you know, knock it out. But you don't want to be writing and finding yourself, thinking, oh crikey, I don't know where I'm going now. Where am I? Where's my thread? Where's my
Yes.
thread gone?
So one of the things you spoke about is that there's a bit of a trend in working with podcasters, and I imagine that's sort of knocking on the door of people like YouTubers and things like that as
Mm.
well. It's people who regularly create non-written content. There's a bit of a buzz going around the digital marketing industry around content repurposing, and that's, I guess, nothing new. I think it's just finally starting to hit the mainstream that if you produce one piece of content, that should really trickle down through lots and lots of different formats, micro formats, and things like that. So what are some of the common challenges that you see people like podcasters, and I assume people who produce video are the same, and what do you bring to that, I guess?
So I think it's important to say that although, many podcasters, and same for YouTubers, are great verbal communicators, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be great written communicators. Or they may not have the time as well, to write, their own written content. So that's where I step in, I guess, and that's it. It's common sense, really, isn't it? The repurposing of content. It's like, well, if I'm going to spend half a day or a day writing loads of content, then I want to get, bang as much bang for buck as possible. So the sorts of things that I will do are, I'll write a long form article that can be used on LinkedIn. I could create a shorter blog post format, a form for the person's website, and then, you create social media, a series of social media posts off the back of it, pointing people to, wherever the client needs them to be pointed to. And obviously, you'd want to be doing something like that for every podcast episode. Um, so yeah, and it's also it's looking at the content of a podcast episode and thinking, what are the headlines here? How can I make something that's really snappy? So I don't know, 5 things you need to know about X, or and then how can I use those things? So, but yeah, for me, as someone who's worked in marketing and PR for decades, and who writes for a living, it's kind of second nature for me to be able to view content of any kind and pick out the headlines quickly and easily, and it's not quite so easy for others.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because I really struggle with that sometimes. You can have the best interview in the world, but trying to pick out what some people would call the tweetables,
Yeah.
it's really, really difficult. I think it really is. I think some people have a visual eye, some people have an eye for written text, and yeah, I can totally see the value in that.
I wrote an Amazon best-selling book recently off the back of a podcast series, which was about a particular theme, and that's it. As you were talking, then my mind took me back to listening to those podcast episodes, and literally I would be listening and I would be writing down the killer quotes and the the headline points from each episode.
That's a really good idea. I
Mm.
hadn't thought of that.
Oh, there you go.
No, you've just given me a really good idea. I mean, it sounds flippant to say you give me a really good idea, and I should qualify that for the listener. And I think a lot of people say that you can use a podcast as a vehicle for writing a book, because every single episode is a bit of a case study.
Yeah.
But once you've produced a podcast episode, you don't necessarily go back and listen to it because you've had that conversation.
Mm.
You do in order to edit it, but that's a very different process, and you're listening in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas to go back and try and extract the real value from every single episode, that's a really nice idea, and I hadn't considered it. And again,
Yeah.
like a lot of things, it sounds like common sense, but the thing about common sense is it's not very common.
Well, that's it. I think you're absolutely right. It is a really good thing to do, and most podcasters now have their episodes transcribed, and that is so valuable because that there you can lift things from the transcript quite easily, potentially, and also if you were to take kind of say I have a client who I've been working with who has a podcast about a health related issue, and she wants to create a book based on 10 episodes that sum up what you would need to know straight away if you were diagnosed with this condition. So that's another way that a podcaster could use material. There's several different ways, but yeah, it could be it could be about a theme, or it could be like, I guess, the lady with the health condition podcast, a kind of best of, if you like. But
Yeah.
there's lots of different ways, and if you're creating so much content, if you have a podcast, it would seem a shame to not be squeezing every last bit of juice out of that, even if that does mean that you're creating content not in a written format. That doesn't mean that you can't create lots of written content from that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
I think where I'd like to go next is the ghostwriting side of things,
Sure.
because it's my philosophy of digital marketing is it does actually include book writing. Now, I'll qualify this. I think every good, strong digital strategy should include a lot short-term elements, so things like ads, medium-term elements, so things like email marketing, social media, social networking, basic content marketing. But then there are long-term elements, and these are the bits that agencies, for example, find difficult to deliver a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it's things like the blog. They need consistency. They take a lot of effort, and a lot of people don't want to. Agencies don't like to deliver it,
No.
and people don't like to do it. But it's also things like YouTube and podcast, because they're the things that will really create the clear blue water between you and your competitor. And the search engines also love them as a side benefit. But they also bring an element of authority that really makes you stand out. And then the crowning element of that authority platform is the book,
Yeah.
which is why for me it's part of a digital strategy, but it's the hardest part. So the ghostwriting side of that really allows a lot of people to shortcut that process. So what does the ghostwriting side of things look like for you? I mean, sorry, that was a long preamble to why ghostwriting is important in my view.
Yeah,
But,
it's so it's really interesting, and I mean, I would say, and I know it's very easy for me to say as a ghostwriter, but I think, again, if you get a handle around structure, and this is what I do as a book coach, the biggest hurdle is actually helping people to structure their content. But it's not necessarily as hard as you would think to write a book. And depending, I always ask, one of the first questions I ask my clients is, what material have you got? And I want you to, really think about the source material you might have, because you might be further along in the book writing process than you realize. So, as I say, if you're a podcast and you've got transcripts, or you might be a trainer and you've got course materials, presentations. There are lots of things that people might already have that could be used at least as a basis for a book. And even if not, then if you're starting from scratch, then it's probably like 12 to 16 hours of recorded interviews, which is not actually that much if you think about it. And we're looking for a business book, probably 30 to 50,000 words. Well, if we break that down into 10 chapters, then that's 10 chapters. So introduction, conclusion, 8 chapters in the middle, 3 to 5,000 words a chapter. It's not actually. I think, that Mount Everest perception about writing a book is actually more a kind of series of molehills, or at least Munros. So yeah,
Yeah, certainly when you break it down like that, it does sound perfectly achievable.
it is.
I think the challenge that some people face is that book could very quickly come to define you. So you better make sure that book is something you want to be known for.
Or you could always write another one.
Yeah, I guess so.
That moves along as you do, because no one. I wouldn't worry too much about that, because I know what you're saying. Because once you've got a book, it's going to be in circulation for years, and people pass books on. I mean, there's no other form of content where people would you know almost indefinitely pass your book on to others.
Yeah.
I think, but it's okay, because nobody stands still, and if things change, then write another book. It is possible. It's okay.
So the writing the book is one part of the process, but once it's written, you actually need to do something with it. Ideally, have it published or publish it. Most people these days, especially sort of around the business books, unless you're quite well known and have a large audience, you're likely to go down the self-publishing route. Do you have any orientation for that? What that might look like for most people?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is, at the very beginning of when I start working with clients, I tell them that writing a book is actually 50% about the content, and it's 50% about the marketing of the book, and you better start on that the moment you start working on a book, if not before, because having an audience that you can sell this book to is of the utmost importance. There's no point in writing a book if no one's going to read it. And even something people don't understand, I think, is that these days, even if you get a traditional publishing deal, the publisher will still expect the author to bring a substantial audience to the party. So regardless of whether you're self-publishing or you're seeking a traditional publisher, you're going to need to have your own audience for this book.
I have heard that. So looking at the mechanics of self-publishing.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got your massive Google Doc. What happens next?
So there, even if we're self-publishing, I always advise my clients that they need to be aiming for an end product that is comparable to a traditional publisher's offering.
Yes.
And by that, I mean it needs to be really well written. It needs to be properly proofread and edited. It needs to be you know, have been through the layout process with a professional. It needs to have professional cover design. Um, and I mean, it's like Amazon makes it really easy. And also there's Amazon Create Space, and also there's Ingram Spark. Um, and they're some of the best known self-publishing platforms, and literally they make it so easy, but you need to have used those specialist professionals along the way to make sure that your book is going to look great. So there's no point again in writing great content if it looks awful. And often, so during the research process, I tell my book coaching clients to do customer research, and also to do competitor research, and look at books that have been published by competitors, or at least those in the same sector, and look at what readers, and look at the reviews, look at what the readers liked about those books and what they didn't like. And you would not believe how often the things that the didn't likes include poor spelling and grammar,
Yeah,
badly written. And that's, if you don't want that, because that's the trouble, because books are so long lasting. And as a marketing strategy, they're great, but if you execute them very poorly, again, that is attached to your reputation for quite a long time.
yeah. No, one of my favorite authors is self-published,
Mm,
and he's in the fiction space,
mm.
and his books are full of typos, and you forgive it, but it does sort of draw you out of the flow.
Yeah, but at least that's fiction as
Yeah,
well, Bob. But if this is business, this is a business book. I think you're expecting a level of professionalism there.
yes.
And what does that say about you as a business person if you can't even, you know, spell check your book properly?
So, how do you work with clients on the book side of things? Because obviously, you must have a range of ways that you engage in order to help them through that process.
Yeah, so really there are two main ways. So there's the ghostwriting, where I write the book for them effectively, and that people often sort of ask me, oh, why would someone use a ghostwriter? And really, there are two reasons. And the first one is time, a lack of time. Maybe there's someone who's wanted to write a book for ages, and it just keeps going to the bottom of the to-do list, and they are not able to um, find the time, carve the time out of the schedule to get this book written. The second reason is a lack of confidence in their writing ability, and that's absolutely fine too. Uh, you don't have to be a great writer to write your own book. If you've got a great proofreader and a fantastic editor to help you out, then that's fine. But if you don't, um, then ghostwriter's a good option. And then, as a non-fiction and sort of business book coach, I help people who either, again, want to write a book and can't seem to get started. It's just too overwhelming. They don't know what to do, and they want to write it themselves. And they're having their own voice is really important to them. So with ghostwriting, although the ghostwriter will always try to get a handle on your character, and I'm always listening out for phrases that people say often and that sort of thing, and inject that into the book. Some people, you do have to. The author will have to relinquish control and accept that their book might not always sound like them, because fundamentally it's not going to be them who is writing the book. So my book coaching clients are people who want 100% to have their own voice. They want to write their own book. They are committed to carving out the time in their schedule to get it done, and they work with me over 3 months or 6 months, and I provide support and accountability. So I'll tell them what they need to do. We run through all the research tasks, and that sort of thing, and their brand values, all those things that we've already talked about. And then we'll work on the structure and create a table of contents, which is the book skeleton. That's what it is. And then it's the author's job to put the flesh on those bones. And I get my clients, whether they work with me as a ghostwriter or a book coach, my job is to get them to a final draft manuscript that can then go on to a proofreader and editor, and start going into that publishing process. So that's what I do, really.
Right. Again, very, very structured, which I
Yeah,
like. So,
absolutely. But I can be flexible, and I think, you know, because some people come to me and they haven't started writing, but and I'd always thought those were my people. But actually, I had a lady come to me earlier this year who had started writing, and in fact was about halfway through, but was just worried that she was struggling and needed some help. And so I helped her, and that was really interesting because actually my program was flexible enough to accommodate her needs, even though she was part of the way through. So that was good to know.
so we've spoken quite a lot about what you do for your clients, and I think I've wanted to probably focus on that more than I normally would, because I think what you bring to your clients, a lot of my audience will or should be very, very interested in it. What I'd like to understand a little bit about is how you market your business, because I have to sort of, it's one of the common things I like to understand is how people find their clients, because it's so varied. So how does that typically work for you? I mean, most people, it's either word of mouth or a result of their content marketing or search, or they run ads. What does that typically look like for you?
So, in a in a classic case of physician heal thyself, uh, and I bet I'm not the first person to say that either on this podcast.
No.
Um, I'm a career marketer, and I have historically been very bad at marketing my own business. And I think the reason for that is just confidence. It's gonna involve me putting my head above the parapet, and that's just an uncomfortable place to be. But I have embraced my fear this year, and I've started putting out short videos on LinkedIn. I chose LinkedIn as my platform. So prior to that, it's been purely word of mouth, but I've started putting out these videos on LinkedIn. And I also, and this was interesting, I met up with a competitor a couple of months ago. She works in a different area of the country, so she's a bit more south than me. I'm in Leamington Spa in the Midlands. And she's been a book coach for years. And she's also an author in her own right, but she's not a ghostwriter. So there is some overlap, but not total overlap in our services. But she told me that she got most of her book coaching business from face-to-face networking, which was really surprising to me because I thought that what we did was pretty niche and I wouldn't have expected that to be the case. So I've also started networking and I'm going to stick at it. So these videos are my lead magnets that I've created off the back of those are proving to be quite successful in helping me to build an email list. And my goal for 2020 is just to keep growing the email list, creating great content, repurposing it as much as possible. And yeah, that's kind of that's my plan. But I've had just also I completely sort of recreated really my LinkedIn profile in summer this year. And following the fabulous John Espirian's guidelines, I'm sure he's probably familiar to your listeners, and if not, he should be.
Some of them, I think he's somebody that I do need to have as a guest because I'm very well aware of him, but yeah, I think many people aren't.
He is so amazing. He's a technical writer, but he gives great advice about using LinkedIn to market your business. And all I did was kind of rejig my LinkedIn profile using John's recommendations, which are he gives freely as a PDF document. And I had leads just off the back of that. That was before I even started putting content out there.
Wow, I need to go and have a look.
Yeah, definitely. And then starting to put out those videos. I'm getting several hundred views over. LinkedIn is my primary social media channel, and then I pop it on my Facebook page as well, my content doc Facebook page, and my personal one actually. But yeah, and people are getting in touch. I've got loads of leads. My pipeline's never been so busy.
Very nice.
So 2020
So,
is looking good.
yeah. Well, I guess my last question would be, there are lots of services that you've spoken about, but what I usually find in any one business, and this is really a point of curiosity for a lot of people, but they never ask, but of all the revenue streams that you have, which one is it that tends to be the one that just pays all the bills?
Oh, you're gonna love this one. It's something I haven't actually mentioned at all.
You didn't have to be honest.
I know. It's so a lot of the people I work with are property people. And actually, at the moment, I randomly manage a serviced accommodation property for somebody, a couple of them actually. And in terms of reliability of the money that's coming in, because I've been doing that for like 3.5 years,
Right.
at the moment, that is the thing,
That's almost a separate business, really,
which is
though.
almost a separate business. But having said that, the other than that, it's my book coaching. It's
Right.
from of of the things we've talked about today, it's the coaching that brings the money in, because um, it's one of those services which I've created all the content up front, and that gets emailed out regularly to people who are on the coaching programs. And then above that, it's a video call or two a month. And then, there's some email toing and froing and me having a review of things, but it's all quite strictly defined. The parameters of that interaction quite strictly defined. So it's getting away from trading time for money, and that's my ultimate goal.
Yeah, I think that will resonate with a lot of people. So, Helen, you've been very generous with your time and very generous with your knowledge. If people want to connect with you, how would you like them to do that?
Come and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm under Helen Pollock, and it'd be great to connect with you.
Helen, thank you very much. You've been a great guest. Hopefully everyone is going to get out and start working on their book. You mentioned a couple of free courses. I'll put links to those in the show notes if anybody wants them. I don't know if you want to quickly tell us what they are again.
Sure, yes. So there's the Content Structure Buster mini course. So So that works for everything from a blog post right up to a book. And then I've written a 25-page ebook for people who want to write their own business or non-fiction book but just don't know where to start, which is cunningly entitled "I Just Don't Know Where to Start." Um, so I'd be very happy to offer those to your listeners, yeah, free of charge. So I'll give you
Well,
the
if anyone
link.
wants, yeah, if anyone wants those, you'll find links to them in the show notes. Yeah. So Helen Pollock, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It's been fun.
Writing a book might not be on the agenda for you right now, but if you want to stand out, have any kind of authority or visibility, even if you focus on ads, then you need to have systems and processes for creating and sharing your own great content. Hopefully Helen's courses, which you'll find in the show notes, will help with that. This is going to be the last show of 2019. I'm taking a couple of weeks off and I'll be back on Monday the 6th of January. But before I go, just a quick reminder to subscribe, and if you haven't already, to join our Facebook group. You can find a link in the show notes, or just head to amplifyme.fm/insiders. If you're a regular listener, then I would love for you to connect with me on social media. Follow me on Instagram or Twitter, where I'm at Bob Gentle, or on LinkedIn, where I'm just plain old Bob Gentle. And if you do, then message me so I know and I can follow you back. If you enjoyed the show, then I would love for you to review it on iTunes. It means a lot to me, and it's the very best way to help me reach more subscribers. If you celebrate Christmas, then have a great Christmas and have a great new year, and I'll see you in 2020. My name's Bob Gentle. Thanks again to Helen for giving us her time this week, and to you for listening, and see you next year.